All right, guys, time for an update on this 2020 Katana 1000. Now rocking just the other side at 1,250 miles. So one of the reasons why I want to try to document this motorcycle as much as possible is just because of how rare it is. There really aren't very many of these bikes running around in the States. They might be popular in other parts of the planet, but down here they're not. And I think I've got some pretty strong reasons as to why that is. From the factory, they come with this absolutely hideous bumper thing that goes around the back tire. That's obviously been removed in lieu of a very nice tail tidy by T-Rex. But one of the main takeaways for me with this bike initially were the handlebars. And if you watched any of my other videos on this motorcycle, you know that I will wear this point out, but it does bear repeating. This is a Sato handlebar set, and in essence, it removes that beach cruiser, very odd for this type of motorcycle handlebar setup, and replaces it with this clip-on style, clubman style handlebar setup, which absolutely transforms this motorcycle into what somebody of a certain age would consider the right riding position with something with the nameplate of Katana on it. Katana is supposed to be a sport bike, not a naked style motard type riding position. It just didn't resonate with guys. They wanted a Katana, not something just with the Katana name or Katana styling. And really where they got their Katana-age from is this power plant. It is the 2005 GSX-R 1000 that is absolutely indestructible. It is the benchmark, the yardstick for what power, performance, reliability, just resilience. This is a killer setup, and just so happens to be fitted in the same 2005 to 2008 GSX-R 1000 frame and swing arm. So if it's got all of that going for it, again, it just lost it for a lot of folks with the riding position, with the handlebar type, and with that really goofy bumper thing. It just about nails it with that neo-retro aesthetic. You've got that square headlight like they did back in the 80s. It's just a kick-ass looking bike if you're into this type of an aesthetic. And they just kind of wrecked it with some pretty basic, I don't know, maybe they were in a hurry to try to put something out there. They're still making the Katana in 2024. You just won't see one on any dealer showroom, or if you do, it'll be a special order because, man, to see one of these things out on the road is rare enough, much less run into one in a showroom. If it's not been special ordered, I'm surprised it would be there. Matter of fact, I was talking to one of the guys at a Suzuki dealership. I was picking up some stuff for this bike. And weirdly enough, he was talking about their allocations with their Katanas, and he was telling me just how they had to dealer trade out of state their bikes because nobody wanted them. They wouldn't take them. And so anyway, just goes to show you little details like that handlebar setup. If you know about it, then it's worth buying, and it's expensive, but it's worth every penny to get the right riding position on this bike. One other thing about these GSX-S platform bikes from the factory is the muffler setup itself. Now, I have painted mine. That is a high temp black ceramic paint, and it helps that muffler to kind of blend in with the rest of the bike. You don't really notice it, which is a good thing because from the factory it's stainless steel, and you know how stainless steel, the welds can kind of rust and it looks a little bit jinky. Anyway, I made that change to this bike. It's also got an M4 slip-on, which is weird at what it did for this bike. It actually smoothed it out. I wouldn't believe it. If somebody were to tell me that about a slip-on, I would say, look, man, you're dreaming it up. It's a placebo effect. But no, it absolutely did smooth this bike out quite a bit. Maybe it's confirmation bias with the fact that it's breaking in. You guys have to remember, I bought this bike it was practically new old stock. The guy traded it in on another motorcycle with 230, 240 miles on the clock. Hell, I had to run gasoline through this thing just to get it to where it didn't have 3-4-year-old gas in it. So maybe there's something to be said there. I don't know. But it has been serviced. It's had a couple of oil changes at this point. Obviously, that's all I've done to the bike. It still has the coolant. I need to do a coolant flush and a brake fluid flush on it. But man, this thing just keeps making me smile. And I got to tell you, of the Neo Retros, this is the best. I had a Z900 RS Cafe. And the problem with that bike is that the suspension was set up for somebody that weighed about 130 pounds. I'm not kidding. And I don't weigh 130. I weigh more like 200 pounds. And that bike, it just never was right. And even if I were to have put a better suspension, like a better spring pack on the back of that thing, it still would have not been what this bike is. That bike's built on a Z900 platform, which is a sport naked bike that is not designed to have the kind of power that this thing does, and nor does it. It's down by about 50% from the factory. This bike is rated at 150 horsepower versus that Z900 RS platform being around 100, and even its best variant, the Z900 Sport Naked bike, is really only at 120. It sounds like a good number, but when you ride one, it's a bit asthmatic. They really could have done more with that platform, which is kind of why I ended up looking for the Katana. I'd even mentioned that if Suzuki made a bike that was retro themed based off the GSX platform, I would go for it and I would get one. I didn't even know this bike existed when I bought my Z900 RS Cafe. That's a mouthful. Anyway, that just goes to show how this bike was not very well received, but with some tasteful modifications, it does really well. As far as if I'll get this thing tuned, guys, I don't know. The tune in this bike is really good, and I've put this bike up against a tuned variant of the GSX S1000. It's the exact same bike underneath the skin, and this bike hung with it. I mean, there was no separation of power between one and the next. There could be some case that this bike has a little bit better aerodynamics than that other bike did, so maybe something to be said there. But again, these bikes are they're underrated. The pre-22 bikes, I believe, have bigger cams, and they're known for putting down numbers on the dyno that are a little bit suspect. If you're looking for 150 and they're putting down 140 plus horsepower, you got to know that's a little bit of a fib. So, but yeah, these bikes make great power. They're a heck of a lot of fun. I love the way this thing is styled, and none of that has changed. Could you want for more power? Everybody wants a little bit more juice, but I got to tell you, this thing's comfortable, fun, absolutely rips, and I do enjoy the hell out of riding it. Now, the modifications that I have made, of course, the bars will be the first one that I'll mention. The tail tidy, getting rid of that bumper thing, which is abominable looking. It does have a set, you may not even have noticed, it's got a set of RNG frame sliders, which I do recommend. They blend into the bike extremely well. Let's see, what else? The M4 exhaust, which is on the other side of the bike. Oh, I did remove the restrictor out of the air box, so there is that. Obviously, can't show you that, but yeah, everything I've done, it does have the stock air filter in it too. Everything that I've done to this bike, like I say, if you were to put it on a dyno, a legit 145, 146-ish to the rear tire, I think is what most people will say this thing will make. And I absolutely adore it. I cannot, again, say enough good things about this bike. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about it that I should mention. Nope, that's pretty much it as far as modifications. Oh yeah, one other thing. I knew I was forgetting something. I did adjust the rear shock. It is at the stock standard GSX S setting of 4 as opposed to 3. It's set up a little bit softer on the Katana from the factory. A couple of the other GSX S variants are set up that way, but they all have the same component. So when you click over to the number 4 setting, the preload will be the same, and it is really, really good at that setting. I haven't touched anything else on this bike as far as suspension settings. It hasn't needed it at all, which is a very nice departure from that the Z900 RS Cafe. That suspension, I got it to where it would work. Don't get me wrong, I was able to ride the wheels off of that thing, but when the temperature went up, obviously the viscosity goes down in some parts, and I took it out. Anyway, it was real apparent that I needed to do something else, and this bike came up. Oh, the tires. So one thing that Kawasaki did teach me is that these S22s are really, really good. Bridgestone with the S22 and the S23s, I can't say enough good things about this tire. They heat up quick. As you can see, I'm getting this thing, I'm pretty much eating up the half of that S22. No news is good news when it comes to tires. They stick, they heat up pretty quickly. These S22s seem to need a little bit more break-in time than the other ones did on the Kawasaki, probably because I was leaning on them a little bit harder than I was on the Kawasaki, so there's that. But just a few times of getting this thing over on the side of the tire and pouring the cold to it, she's doing just fine. So there you go. That's how these things are running in. I like to run 37-ish in the rear in terms of pressure. So 37 out back and 35 up front seems to be a bit of a happy place for these tires. So 35 and just a couple of points to make sure it's 35 up front, 37 and just a couple of points just to make sure it's 37 out back. Just kicked the key on. One other modification, and I can't believe I should have mentioned this first. I did make the switch to have the daytime running lights be integrated as blinkers. It comes with this absolutely nutty looking, super long, anyway, again, to show you what that looks like, cruising down the road, you've got your daytime running lights, you hit your blinker, and it switches over to being a blinker. Should have come like that from the factory. It's the fact that it didn't is just kind of weird. Anyway, that's what that looks like. And as far as wind protection, this question came up in another video. It does have the Suzuki aftermarket fly screen, and it is supposed to look like that, by the way. There's I think a Samurai version and a Shogun version. And anyway, yes, you do use it in concert with your factory fly screen, if you will. And I love it. I think it looks phenomenal. The partial fairing, along with that factory fly screen, does a very good job of getting air around you. Better than you might think just by looking at it. I can tell you that, guys, look, this bike spends a lot of time in triple-digit territory, and I don't have any issue getting buffeted or buzzed around or anything like that by the wind. So there you go. I mean, no news is good news when it comes to stuff like that. I can't find a reason to complain because it gets the wind off of me. As far as the way I ride this bike, it doesn't faze me in the least. All right, guys, so there you go. I'm going to wrap this video up. I just want to keep chronicling this bike. I know a lot of folks, they're not familiar with them. They didn't even know that this bike existed. I can understand why it didn't sell well. Just with a couple of modifications, you can make it right, though. And this bike, God, if they just made more bikes like this, it would, man, why is there no GPZ 1000 like this instead of the Z900 RS or the Cafe? I don't know. But anyway, doesn't matter. I've got the exact bike that I want. Absolutely enjoy riding this bike more than any other motorcycle that I've owned. Maybe the Bonneville's up there close to it, but I think you get the idea. I'm having a ball with it, and hopefully this gets you guys up to speed with this thing. Post up your comments below. Let me know what you think, and we'll catch you on the next one.